The financial divide in Canada seems to be getting greater and greater as time has gone on. Especially in these last few years, we're seeing a lot more haves and have-nots. And a lot of that comes down to government spending. And people are always surprised when you say, hey, the more money the government spends, the more that's actually hurting you as Canadians. And, we can find out some of the reasons that they are to blame in today's video. What's going on? Why are Canadians feeling like they have less money? And why we are struggling to make ends meet and housing is getting so expensive. BNN Bloomberg brought on an expert today, brought some points forward, and we were able to find out some of the things that are going on. Why are boomers maybe doing better? The younger generation struggling? Let's dive into today's video.
We are now 2 weeks away from the federal Liberal government's budget for 2024. Now, since they announced they would be unveiling the budget, we have seen fiscal and policy experts weighing in on what Canadians can expect, everything from housing to affordability measures right now. There is a growing fiscal divide between Canadians, which Angus Reid Institute has been tracking. Joining us with some more perspective is Shashi Kurl. She's president of the Angus Reid Institute. Josh, it's great to see you. And I guess, these moments, especially when we're already running deficits, we know it's not going to be a balanced budget, are political.
What a surprise. Not going to be a balanced budget. The budget doesn't just balance itself. Duh.
Opportunities, I suppose, and the Liberal government's likely taking the temperature of Canadians in advance of the budget. What is your
taking the temperature of Canadians by probably, if I had to guess, offering a lot of free stuff in the budget?
data telling you right now?
So many things, John, but it really comes down to one thing. It's continuing pain around affordability and the cost of living, particularly for middle to lower income earners in this country who are increasingly of the view that that the years ahead, particularly the year ahead, is going to be worse for them than it is better. So two things are starting to happen in terms of Canadians' own personal financial outlooks. If you look at Canadians in one of four boxes, they're either struggling, these tend to be lower income Canadians who are younger and just having a really hard time with even the basics around cost of housing, meeting rent. Most of them are actually not in a position to be paying a mortgage right now. They're in one bucket. You've got the uncomfortable, you've got the comfortable, and then finally on the other end, you've got the thriving. Tend to be older Canadians, people who are not dealing with housing debt anymore.
So the interesting thing is, generally speaking, younger people are more likely to vote Liberal. Lower income Canadians also more likely to vote Liberal, NDP, any of the people who are promising them free stuff. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, when you promise free stuff, there is a cost. And I do agree that we need some level of government spending and some, level of keeping it involved in creating initiatives. And some of these things need to exist. But the level of government spending is off the rails. The amount of free stuff that's being offered. And we just don't have the infrastructure to keep up with this. So the spending is happening, but we're not actually producing more. We're not growing. So the collection is not happening on the other end. And so when you see spending, but the economy not growing, that means the government is just creating more and more of a deficit. And the problem becomes they're putting money into the economy that really shouldn't be there. And that will make inflation worse, because not only does that mean that costs are going to go up from the carbon tax and all of the extra things that they've put in place, but now, because of the free money that they're giving out, people continue to have more money to spend, and they're creating these dollars. And at the end of the day, it's not so much that prices are going up, it's that the dollar's being devalued because they're putting out so much more money than we are actually, creating as well. So that's always the struggle when having these conversations with the people are, well, the Liberals are giving us this free stuff. And it's it feels like you're getting free stuff, but it's costing you way more money in the long run and going to increase your cost of living.
They may also be feeling the pinch of cost of living issues, but they're also able to benefit from the savings rates these days being offered with high interest rates. So it costs more to borrow, but you get more back saving. Through that continuum, The thriving and the comfortable are more likely to say that next year is going to be a great year for them fiscally. The uncomfortable and the struggling are more likely to say that next year for them is going to be even tougher. So we're starting to see that divide really starting to open up. And we are finding, as we listen to the Prime Minister, his announcements, everything that Ottawa is running around and announcing ahead of this budget, are measures that they believe both politically and financially will resonate with those who are in that uncomfortable or struggling box.
Yeah, because again, they're going to hear that they're getting free stuff. They're going to hear that the money is being promised to them. But it really comes down to just a few things that Canada needs to do that will help Canada thrive. So I'm a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me in the link below if you want to work with me as a real estate agent. I do have a network all across Canada. I can handpick somebody in your market. But you would think that I would be incentivized, that I want prices to always go up. But that's not the case. I want a healthy market for everybody. It's actually better when you have a position where there's not 21 offers coming into a house because, nobody wins in that exchange except for maybe the seller, but not even the seller. That's what people don't understand. They think the seller, is running off into the sunset because they got this huge price. But if they're buying something else or transitioning to some other living, their living cost is going up as well from those scenarios. So a healthy market is so much better for everybody. And it's like, how do we get that to happen? We cut immigration, we increase building, and of course, we've got to get rid of this stupid carbon tax. I just don't think people realize how damaging that carbon tax is actually going to be in the long term and how damaging it's been so far. So if we can fix those three things, like the cost of living, which takes up the majority of people's income right now is housing, I think we can have such a big impact to that and make it more balanced out. We don't need a crash necessarily because, Canada's unfortunately right now, the real estate sector is just such a massive part of, Canada's GDP and production. Doesn't need to be. We've got so many resources, we can change that. But let's get a more steady market. Stop promising free stuff, for people who are like when we're not in this situation where we are creating and doing that. And I think that would be one of the biggest impacts. And so you can tell she's obviously trying to be a bit protective to, the Liberal government. I will say she's nowhere near as bad as some of the other ones we've been dealing with, but you can tell it's still there. So let's hear what else she has to say.
So I wonder then, Shachi, because you've got on a provincial level, even, more conservative governments that have been struggling with balancing the books, just as a comparison.
Exactly.
One of the things the economists keep saying to us is they're okay with money being spent so long as there's kind of a return on investment roadmap that makes sense for Canada's economy over the long term. Because whether it's at the federal government level or at the provincial government level, you've heard a lot of politicians asking the Bank of Canada to cut interest rates. And then you've heard the Bank of Canada itself saying to governments, please spend less. It's creating inflation challenges for us.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying earlier. Like, the more the government spends, the more that's going to create inflation challenges for the Bank of Canada, who needs to cut rates. So we've got this vicious cycle of the government's going, hey, people are struggling, cut rates. We keep having to give them money. And the bank's going, if you keep giving them money, we can't cut rates because you guys are allowing them to continue to pay these prices and do these things. But if you stop supporting that, the market will naturally start to correct, and then we can cut the rates, which will alleviate some of these things, allow for private sector spending. People are going to take on more risks. They're going to be able to build again. And, this isn't just a Liberal problem. Unfortunately, the Conservatives are spending a lot these days, the Conservatives. And then Doug Ford, I'm really disappointed with him right now because he did, put a kibosh on us being able to kind of regulate on how we can build fourplexes, create more homes, stuff like that. He was a big missed opportunity for Doug on that one, to be fair. But the problem is, when our unemployment numbers just jumped to 6.1%, and that included the amount of government jobs that we are just printing right now. So government public sector jobs, which are basically holding up the economy. So our public sector, which is the government who only runs off tax dollars, is creating and holding up the economy with tax dollars. So nothing's really being created. It's borrowed money, or stolen tax dollars that are just creating these government jobs, which is keeping up inflation. So they're saying, stop spending on all these jobs, on all these roles, and you're creating inflation, you're making it worse. So they're double dipping because they're stealing the carbon tax and then they're paying Canadians through other, other taxes and borrowed money. And it's just like, guys, you're making it way worse. The Bank of Canada can't cut until you stop. Relax.
Absolutely. And then you pile on top of that, the cri de coeur that you heard from the Bank of Canada was it last week talking about productivity and low productivity rates. And so, insofar as the way that deficit spending used to be a massive issue, think back to 30 years ago, when Canada's own credit ratings were downgraded. You had the famous, for the ages, Paul Martin as finance minister, hell or high water speech. These are not those days. And right now, I think you see a federal government, although we're also seeing it in various ways across many provinces, including, you mentioned the amount of red ink that the Ford government has just announced that they will be spilling per last week's budget. You've got governments at different levels, whether it's provincial or Ottawa, the federal government, looking for ways to spend that money to attempt to alleviate the one tension point and the one pain point that Canadians are repeatedly identifying, and that's make my cost of living more affordable.
Yes, they're looking to spend more money to help with cost of living, but again, when they spend it, it's hurting us. So yes, government support in some scenarios is awesome. I'm happy for it. We're glad to hear it. But when they're punishing us, the prices are spiking, this from the carbon tax and other taxes, of course. We're a ridiculously taxed nation overall. But when you factor in, like, okay, we're taking all this money from taxes, but then we're just printing it back to you by giving it to you, government funded jobs, it's like, and they did mention like the boomers who are in the better situation because they have lower mortgages, but those people are still struggling because often they're on fixed incomes and they don't have a ton of cash savings. So it's like, all their equities in their home or whatever, like those people, when these costs of living continue to go up, they're going to eventually start really feeling that as well. So this divide is, growing, but I also think like the amount of people who are going to be benefiting from this is going to start shrinking to such a level, and then people are going to want more free stuff. It could compound itself. But anyways, guys, I'm a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me in the link below if you do want to work with me or any of my nationwide network. And that's it for today's video. Have a great rest of your day.